Hi, my name is Jason Bonham and welcome to Starlix. Today, I'm going to cover many of the things that grow to create my own style, such as my equipment, some technique, some drum fill ideas, and of course the influences that helped me along to where I am today. Most of the examples I will show you are from recordings that I've done, such as Disregard of Timekeeping by Bonham, and also the Jimmy Page Outrider album. But make sure you follow along with the booklet that comes with this tape, so you know exactly what we're doing. Let's start with my equipment. Well, the size of my snare drum is obviously 14 by 6.5 deep. I chose this one particularly because I like a wood snare drum for one. It is a wood snare drum, and it has you've got the depth and the warmth of the wood, but it seems to have a real good crack, and that's what you really need in rock and roll, I find, is the slap, but you've got to have the, enough depth to do that. So that's the snare drum. It's also my favorite one that I've had with me now for about 6 years that I've used from DW. So then on to the toms. The first rack tom is a 12-inch tom by 10. It was basically, I did want a big deep sound, but I find I can get the sound I want from using smaller drums. So there's the first rack. The first floor tom, which is also almost rack mounted because it is on a bar system, is 14. And some of you might think, that's small for a rock kit. Yeah, but as I said before, sometimes you'll be playing live in a situation, in an arena, for instance, and you might have big drums, but they just don't cut through because of the low end. So that's why I choose smaller drums. Then next to that is my faithful 16-inch floor tom. And if you notice, as you can see, they all have microphones built inside, which is the May system, which is in the floor toms, it's a D112. In the rack, it is the new Sennheiser. In the snare drum, I also have a Sennheiser, and in the last floor rack, I do have another D112. As for the bass drum, once again, the bass drum is small for rock and roll. It's a 22-inch bass drum, but it is actually very long, as you can probably see. It's actually 22 by 28 long. I choose a small bass drum once again. I found it was more comfortable to play, more visual. I could see the rest of the band finally after I grew out of that stage of having a huge drum kit, which I'm sure all of you are going through or actually have been through that. When I first started playing drums when I was 4 years old, I had a small kit. Then later on, I went, well, I want more drums. So I ended up getting one of these huge, humongous Octopus kits and having drums everywhere. It wasn't very comfortable to play. It might look good, but what are you here for? You're here to look good or here to play good? I want to be here to play good. I want people to remember me for my playing, not for what my drum kit looked like. So that's why I eventually wheeled it down back to the original way I started. The pedals I use, as you can probably see if we have a foot shot, are the DW5000 pedals. I use the double pedal basically because I know I'm cheating. I know I'm cheating here, but I'm not quite as quick as my father on his foot yet. I'm working on it. But yeah, I use the DW pedals like the whole kit is DW. Also the hi-hat, I also have attached to the framework so I can be connected, so I don't have to worry about hitting my foot on one of the legs of the hi-hat. And using a double pedal, it's definitely not used just for heavy metal or doing double bass drum things. You can actually work your left foot and use that to try and make it stronger. So sometimes you can give your right foot a break and play with your left as such. The framework, everything's on is Color Lock, which is distributed by DW, which contains everything apart from the snare drum and I think myself. I use cymbal-wise Zildjian. I use a 12-inch splash to my left here. I have a 17-inch China Boy High, Zildjian, China here. 17-inch Dark Crash, 17-inch Dark Crash K, and also a 16-inch China Boy Low on my right-hand side. 21-inch Ride, which is a K. Most of them are in a brilliant cymbal apart from the ride cymbal. The hi-hat is very small once again, like everything on this drum kit. You might be thinking, why does he play such a small kit? But as I said, to me, it cuts through a lot more. The hi-hats is a Z on the bottom with a 13-inch K on top. So now the importance to me of sound is one of the main things on here, and I'm going to try and give you some examples here. For instance, the sound of the drum is obviously from the way the drum's made, the wood it's made of, and what make it is. I use the rims also to enhance that sound, so it's not actually connected to actually anything. They're mounted on rubbers here, as you can see around the drum kit. Examples here and here and here. Now the sound, to me, I like a quite high-ended drums. I don't like to think too low because you'll never hear them once again. Snare drum, I like a nice attack. So now I'll try and give you an example of, say, sounds, dry sounds, because in the days when my father was playing, the room is one of the most important things when you're recording a drum kit. If it's a dead room, it's going to sound very studio-like, very, very early 60s, not like the way my father portrayed himself with that big ambient sound. So now I'll give you one example from when the levee breaks, and this will be a dry sound without any effect on. Because we're doing this tape, I not utilize with a room of that size he had, I'll use effects for this. Example, when the levee breaks, once again, drop the stick. When the levee breaks, this is roughly how it goes. That's dry. Now, with the wonders of technology we have now, if we add like a room reverb effect, it'll sound something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. As you can see, there is a hell of a lot of difference there. So when you do get into that type of groove situation where you need that sound, if you play it and it's got dry, you're not going to have the same effect. So you do need that big ambient sound. For instance, another man who's made it from doing simple type fills, even though he is the most talented drummer, which is Phil Collins, with an effect on the drum, you can really enhance a simple drum fill. For instance, In the Air Tonight, we all know that amazing drum fill, the ba-bum, 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 bum, bum, which he also played on an ABBA track and did it on quite a few other Genesis stuff. So I'll try and give you an example of that. This is dry. That's dry. Now, with the wonders of amazing technology, we'll try once again with the effect. Here we go. So as you can see, there's a lot of difference between the dry and an affected sounding drum kit. Plus, with what your drums sound like, that's the most important thing is when you tune your drums, don't sprinkle them with gold dust too soon. Tune the drums so they sound great dry, and then when you sprinkle the fairy dust on top of them using the effects, you're in heaven. was an example of Darlene, which came from the Coda album from Led Zeppelin. Now, welcome to the timekeeping segment of this part of the show. Timekeeping to me is very important. I was brought up and taught to play rhythms, and to play time was far more important than learning the fancy parts first, like the rudiments. Okay, yes, you've got to learn those type of things. Even though I didn't, I try and get by as much as I can. Timekeeping, my father always used to get that built-in metronome. He'd switch the jukebox on, he'd make me play to every different styles of music, just so I can get the feel, so I can actually play with a band. And that's important too, to play with a band rather than just go, okay, and sit there with a pad and go, 1E and a 2E, 1 a 3 and a 4E, whatever you're supposed to do, or paradiddles and things. If you can groove, then learn that. Why run before you can walk? Now, referring back to Darlene, there's a very interesting drum pattern in there. Instead of playing the hi-hat and the bass drum on the downbeat, I play on the 16th after the downbeat, which gives it a kind of flowing feel. And I'll give an example without the band, I should say. It goes like this. As you can see, it adds something else to the rhythm rather than, for instance, you could actually take that same groove and play something simpler like this. But then again, that's boring, you know. It's not boring if you've got another feel or another part of the song, but to that rhythm, the guitar, what you're listening to, what my father was listening basically to what Jimmy Page was playing there, and the way it would move. So it was like a bum, bum, ba, da, 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 and he would accent on, as I said, on the 16th after the downbeat to give it, make it roll rather than the guitar just stopping, and that hi-hat and the bass drum seems to lift it a little bit more. Now, referring back to the opening of this tape, I played some time from a track called Wait For You. What I'm actually doing in the verse of Wait For You, after the big chord builds, is quite weird, and a lot of people have asked me this, how I got that idea to change it around. Well, basically, I was just playing the drums to Wait For You one day, and I got sick of playing it, boom, boom, bap, boom, bap, boom, boom, bap, boom, bap, boom, boom, bap, boom. I want to make it really difficult to dance to. So what I did was, on the big crash on the verse, I hit it on the and of 3. And then but it makes it sound like the downbeat because I'm taking the whole thing and moving it by 1/8 note. So then instead of hitting the snare drum on 2 and 4, I'm hitting it on the and. For instance, if I keep the bass drum straight now, I'll show you an example. But when I play it with the band, as I'll show you now, I accent and change the bass drum. So as it goes like this. as you can see there, it really makes it sound fun and interesting, and it's great watching people dance to it in a disco and they start doing this weird movement because it changes them around. So that's what I'm doing there. And plus, timing is always essential. Like, so if you can try and make something a little bit more interesting than straight four, and just what I'm doing there, it adds a little element of surprise to people when they're listening. They go, "What are you doing there?" So it's like, as for instance, I could have played Wait For You like this. You get pretty bored of that. If you want, I'll just try and slow it right down for you now, so you can try and get a hold of it this way. Always remember that one is always comes back in there. It's really strange the way it comes back in. But then the second time I do that, it carries on one segment longer, so it's... Here's another example of timekeeping. Another one from the legendary, yes, my father, the man who taught me everything I know, Mr. John Henry Bonham. This is something that actually Jeff Beccaro, a good friend of mine, and this goes out to him, he did it very, very well, but I like playing it anyway, so I'm going to do it for you. It's a shuffle beat, and you'll recognize where Jeff got all his licks from with Bernard Purdie, and where I stole it from Jeff till he actually told me he stole it from my father and Bernard Purdie. But this goes out to you, Jeff. I'm going to try and do it as best as I can. This is Fool in the Rain, an example of, I should say. Well, that was an example of what my father did on the Fool in the Rain track. And I just wanted to do that especially for Jeff Beccaro, who's a good friend of mine, as I said before. But, well, that about wraps it up, really, on the timekeeping part. But if you want to hear more of how I played Wait For You, if you want to hear it in context with the band, once again, apart from on this tape, it's on the Disregard of Timekeeping album from Bonham. Check that out. There's also some other groovy stuff on there, which I'll get into later. And also, if you want to hear the Darlene, it's on the Coda album by Led Zeppelin, and by The Fool in the Rain, it's on In Through the Outdoor by Led Zeppelin. So there were some examples of timekeeping, and always remember, always try and play, but don't run before you can walk. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, ladies and gentlemen, to find out what really makes me tick. No, not that. No, the drum fill segment of this part of the show is the fun part, because I get to go crazy and do all these weird things and then explain to you exactly what I was doing, which is probably tougher than actually playing them. So, as you've just heard, the piece of music was the outro of Dreams. If you've ever seen myself live, that's the way I play it live. I do not play that same way on the record. I generally try and use all of the kit, well, utilising toms, bass drum and snare drum on that one drum fill, as you will probably hear. I'll give you an example of that same fill. Something like this, in this tempo. I'll show you that again. Basically what I'm doing there is groupings of 6, which comes from, I'm starting with 2 on my hands and 2 on my feet, but then basically it is groupings of 6. With the toms I'm doing actually 4 on my hands and 2 on my feet, as I've just shown you the example of it. But then you can make it a lot more fun, and it does sound kind of big, because when you've got the bass drums going, you've got the toms going and the snare drum, you can actually, I'm accenting more on the snare drum. But then you can have fun with it and try and play with it, with maybe using just the snare drum, maybe using just the toms, and I'll give you some examples of that now. So the same type drum fill would go something like this, just on the snare drum using the bass drums. Things like that. So when you put it into context in that same fill, get that effect. So now I'll try it with the tom-toms. So using the whole kit in those time configurations, you can have a lot of fun, especially on your own when you're trying to think of them on your own. So definitely try and think, okay, well he does it like that. What can I do it like? By using the same technique of using maybe even using 4 on your feet, 2 on your hands, and then alternating it, using all of the kit. Maybe even try accenting with cymbals and things, and you can really have a lot of fun with that. So now the next drum fill I want to show you is from the Disregarded Time Keep album. It's a track called Guilty, which is basically, I'm using triplets, but I'm speeding them up in a way. But it's still a very slow, straight pounding 4 beat, which really digs in if you've heard the track before. So I'll give you an example of that now with the time sequence. So what I was doing there basically is a very simple pattern, but I'm adding doubles with the bass drum. So when you, at home, you can do exactly what we did on the last drum fill. You can have a lot of fun with it and maybe accent with bass drums, or maybe change it around and make it just on the snare drum. But I'll show you an example. Basically all it is right plate with the toms. So then, when I add the bass drums, it sounds something like this. I'm doing doubles rather than just a single on the bass drum, where I could have gone. But now when you add, using the cheating pedal, you add it and make it sound like this. I'll try and slow that down a lot more for you, hold on. So I'll play it again in time. And that's why it makes it kind of sound cool when you have the doubles, because you can really have fun with that, because you can be ripping like. So you can have a lot of fun with that, like I do, and it really messes the rest of the guys in the band up when you keep doing those. Now, so the next thing I want to get onto is maybe some hi-hat fill work and using the bell cymbal. And now this is something, an example of a good friend of mine, Richie Hayward, who plays with Little Feat. And it's basically a first line, like New Orleans type groove thing, using the snare drum, bass drum, hi-hat. I'll show you one example of that now. That is a lot of fun to play. Now try playing it by using the bell and playing the opposite way around. That works well. Now try using them both together and it sounds, I hope, something like this. Great fun to play. Get into that, some of that Little Feat more jazzier stuff. Don't just be a slogger. I'm not a slogger, and I never will be. I'm one of these players. I do like finesse things as well. For instance, a classic example. Check out some Police records, some of the hi-hat work Stuart Copeland does. Some GAD stuff is very similar to that, and it really helps you when you, instead of just going when you're doing fills or like. If you use little finesse things like that by using the bells and the cymbals, like for instance another fill which is fun to use is using the hi-hat, for instance this. I'll try and slow some of that down, but because I'm a fill player I don't really remember everything I usually do, so I'll just try and show you some examples of what I just did, slowed down. So you're playing in like that tempo, and you can go something like. And if you follow along with the booklet, like I hope you're doing, then you should know basically what I'm doing there. Now I'll go back to the Little Feat track and try and slow that down for you so you can hear what I'm doing there slower. It's like that. With the bell, goes something like this. So you can have a lot of fun with that one also, using the bell and maybe switching it around and doing it with the hi-hat into the bell and the bell to the hi-hat, and you know, it's just crazy. The next thing I want to show you is something that a lot of people have always got wrong. I don't do it exactly the same way, but I do it in the right timing. My father, it's the rock and roll intro to the song Rock and Roll. It's actually an old Little Richard thing that he once taught me. But basically it's da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da, bam 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 ba 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 ba, and in. And most people will always get that wrong. I'll show you the way I play it. I'll show you that one more time. accent and carrying on playing. So that was always a difficult one for you to do. It's actually very, very simple, as I said. But he used to play it because he had a lot stronger left hand than I did. That's why I play it the cheating way and just let the cymbals make the noise for me. But I keep the snare drum going, which actually he did. So he played it like that. And whatever play you play, I play match. But whatever the way you want to do that, as long as you do it in the right time context, you're always going to come in the right time. Just make sure the rest of the band knows it before you do it. So it's very, very simple. So always remember that it's basically da-da-da-da, 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 bam, 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 ba 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 ba, and in. So that was rock and roll. Basically, you're probably bored of me waffling on and talking to you. You go, hey man, why don't you play? Okay, let me just play some of those fills and what I was doing, and we'll basically have a good time, and I'll just play all these fills and hit the cymbals and do all things like that for the next couple of minutes. Here we go then. Well, I hope you had fun with that, and you can work with them as the best as you can and make up your own, and never know, one day I'll be watching you teaching me what to do. I bet you're all wondering what approach and inspiration really means. It basically means this is the fun part of the show, where I can get to relate to you and give you some hints and what to do about before you start playing, or when you're playing, or what to do in a live situation. I find my approach is, a lot of drummers ask me, do you warm up? No. That's the end of that question. No, I just don't tend to warm up. I answer them back with no, because I find I'm more into it when I go up on stage rather than being bored with the drum kit already. It's nice to go on there fresh and like, oh, I can't wait to play, rather than I've just played for an hour warming up. Okay, yes, sometimes it does take you like at least the first bar to get into it, but it works for me. It might not work for you, but that's my approach anyway. Also, when you're at home, don't just keep setting the same drum kit up. Have fun with it. Take some toms off. Take a cymbal away. Even take all the cymbals away and play. Take toms away, change it around, change your setup every now and again. Like you see this setup now, it might be different the next time you see me. It always takes it away from being stale, so it makes you think while you're playing. So imagine that you're playing a drum kit and you've got an extra 2 toms there. You're always going to do that, maybe that same routine. Take the 2 away. You have to think, so it keeps you on your toes at all times. Inspiration, listen to records or whatever you find is inspirational to you. go and see a live band. I always find sometimes after seeing a live band or seeing a great drummer play, it makes me play better because it makes me think, you know, wow, that guy is really good. I want to be like that. I want to maybe try those things out. And I get back home and I'll play for hours. Always make it fun. Don't do it as a routine. Don't get into a situation where, like a 9 to 5, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I've got to do everything right. Have fun. Drumming is energetic, and you can hit things and you don't get arrested. So that's why my approach and inspiration. And I suppose one of the main inspirations was always my father, John Bonham. And I might as well share a little story with you, which is quite amusing. One time he was playing away at a charity convention in England, and he basically, everyone said, "Come on, John, get on the drum kit." He was like giving the kit away for charity reasons, and he got on the drum kit and he started playing, but it was on a wooden floor. So you imagine the drum kit set up there. You know what Spurs are like if they haven't got the rubber stoppers and they slide around everything. And he's sitting there playing away, really getting into it. Everyone was having a great time. All of a sudden, he disappeared because it was in a huge marquee, went straight through the back of the marquee, and everyone just saw him there. And he was lying in a rose bush going, "Could somebody get me out of here, please?" And see, things like that I find are fun. Like once what happened to me, I was playing away at a concert, same type of thing. Bass drum starts moving, going off towards the end of the riser. But I didn't know. It was at the end of the song, so I'd had enough of this bass drum, so I was going to kick the hell out of it, throw the cymbals off, smash everything up. But underneath, my drum tech was, where the stool was here, my drum tech was holding on to the bass drum like this, and I didn't see this. So I'm kicking away, and the drums, and he's there like, "No, Jason, don't do it, don't do it." And things like that. Always remember those fun times, and when you play, just always don't take everything so seriously. If your cymbal moves or falls, laugh about it. Don't make everybody look at you and go, "There's something wrong with that kid." Always try and make the audience feel that you're having a good time, because then they'll have a good time. Well, that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed the video. But before I go, check out these records. This is what I listen to when I'm at home. Anything by Led Zeppelin, obviously. Please try and give us a listen if you want to hear my style. They're on the Bonham album, the Disregarded Timekeeping. Also the Jimmy Page Outrider album, check that out. Plus anything by Little Feat with Richie Hayward drumming. That's about it, really. That's the things I listen to, Phil Collins, obviously. So always remember this, though. No matter how much you're influenced, always try and be yourself. And I'll see you next time.